For a long time, Insidious was one of those movies that I just never got around to watching for one reason or another. I'm a massive horror and James Wan fan, and I've always heard really good things about it. So this past week, I finally decided to give it a try. And now I fully understand why so many people love it. Insidious shows off all of James Wan's strengths. The film is a masterclass in atmosphere, the visuals are peak horror, and Wan's films reliably portray rootable characters. Not to mention, there are numerous top-notch scares in here. Yet despite all that, I walked away from the movie feeling that it could have been so much better. As it stands, Insidious is a good movie. But it was so close to being great. And all of this is because of the character arc of Rose Byrne's Renee. Spoilers ahead for Insidious. Character arcs and story structure are portrayed slightly differently depending on who you talk to, but when you boil it down, everyone uses the same formula. There are no absolute rules for writing, but the most common versions of story and character arcs are similar in almost every story ever told. We first meet our lead character in the world that they inhabit. Here we ideally gain empathy for them and discover what they want. This is also where we get insight into the protagonist's flaw, which they will need to overcome. In a positive change arc, overcoming this flaw is the basis for a character's journey. If the opening of a movie can make us learn about and empathize with a main character while establishing a flaw to be overcome, then the narrative is off to a great start. In Insidious, the first time we see Renee, she is woken up by the snoring of her husband Josh. She looks worn out but accepting of her situation. Thinking no one else is awake, she heads downstairs and takes out an old photo album. It doesn't take long for her son Dalton to walk up behind her. This interaction instantly shows us that she is a loving, caring mother.
Do you know who that is?
No,
It's me.
it doesn't look like you.
I know, but that's me. It's your mom. I was a kid once too, believe it or not.
You're old now.
Renee longs for the freedom that she once had. She very clearly loves her family, but she looks back on a time when she had her whole life ahead of her. We then get a glimpse of her daily routine, which seems stressful to say the least. She's responsible for getting their new house in order, as well as getting her 3 children and Josh ready for the day. As she tries to juggle all of this, she notices a spilled out box of books. The camera doesn't linger on them, but the books are clearly visible. The Power of Focus for Women, a real book about helping women who are struggling to deal with the hectic life that comes with motherhood, and self-healing through music, which as far as I can tell isn't a real book, but the purpose is self-evident. The chaos of Renee's morning is filmed using a handheld camera to emphasize the fact that she can't find a balance in her life. Then, once the house clears and Renee gets some time to herself, Juan switches to a beautiful dolly shot. When Renee is alone, she's able to freely express herself in music. She sings about how she still has aspirations beyond just being a mother, but how those goals feel like a distant dream.
Yeah, I'm looking west. Always been looking that way. I'm gonna be somebody. I just can't be her today.
Renee's moment to herself is short-lived, as crying blares through the baby monitor. The rack focus highlights the fact that Renee can't even be the focus of her own life for more than a few moments. Despite the toll that being the primary caregiver takes on her, we know that she deeply loves her family. We see that in her interactions with Dalton and later at night in bed with Josh. The first 15 minutes of the story show us that Renee is a loving mother and wife who's so beaten down by her responsibilities that she's lost herself. She no longer has her own free will. Rather, she plays the part that she is supposed to. She's almost trapped in her own life, unable to be who she always envisioned herself becoming. Renee is stuck, hoping that she can reach her goals at some hypothetical future date. In this section of story, we also learn about the personalities of Josh and Dalton. That way we can care about them and understand why they are important to Renee, but we don't learn as much about their internal struggles or flaws, because this isn't their story. This is the story of Renee's self-actualization, where she will learn that she can be a strong mother that chooses her family, but also chooses herself. Renee will learn that she isn't trapped. The setup of Insidious works brilliantly. We learn all of this in an entertaining manner with minimal exposition. And like any good story, the main themes play out all around the protagonist. Insidious's inciting incident is the revelation that Dalton is in a coma that can't be explained or solved. Around the story's midpoint, it's revealed that Dalton has the ability to astral project his spirit when he sleeps, and that he accidentally wandered too far from his body and can't get back. Just like Renee, Dalton can't control his life any longer and is trapped. After the inciting incident, everything in the story changes and characters are forced to react to the problem that's introduced to their lives. For Renee, who doesn't know anything about the supernatural elements at play, this means keeping her family together while trying to cure Dalton through traditional medical practices. Then a new obstacle is thrown in the characters' paths, and they have to try to resolve it while the circumstances around them escalate. In this section of the story, characters' flaws are highlighted in how they deal with escalating conflict. The protagonist hasn't yet realized that they have a key flaw that needs to be overcome. In Renee's case, this obstacle manifests in the form of paranormal events that force her to believe that her new home is haunted. Because Renee has yet to come to terms with her defining flaw, she handles her problems in a way that highlights her issues for the audience. She's still trapped in her overwhelmed housewife role, unable to fully take control of the situation. So she spends the next portion of the story trying to convince Josh to solve her problems for her. After all, how can someone who lacks a strong sense of self handle an existential problem this pervasive? When Josh fails to solve the situation, Renee decides that she wants to move out of their house, and Josh agrees to her request. However, when they get to their new house, the haunting doesn't stop, so she seeks help from paranormal investigators. This ends the next phase of storytelling, and so far, everything is going well. After learning about who Renee is as a character, we see her dealing with her struggles in a realistic way, and we as an audience are being primed for the next phase of her arc. Now we reach the midpoint of the story. According to author K.M. Weiland, the midpoint is like a second inciting event. Like the first inciting event, it directly influences the plot, it changes the paradigm of the story, and it requires a definitive and story-altering response from the characters. The largest difference is that the character's response is no longer just a reaction, but the moment at which she begins to definitively take charge of the story and act out against the antagonistic force. This sounds exactly like the midpoint of Insidious. So Elise, the paranormal expert, informs the Lambert family that Dalton is astral projecting and that demons and spirits are trying to take control of his body while he's away. Josh can't handle this news. He refuses to believe it and accuses Renee of going too far by buying into Elise's story.
No, I'm sorry. This has gone too far.
No, please. Josh, you said that you would give her a chance.
No, I have given her a chance, honey, but I can't have somebody coming into our home and telling us that the reason our son is in a coma is because his soul is floated off somewhere in another dimension.
This is a great plot point for the midpoint, and yet the first sign that the story is losing clarity. If this is the story of Renee's self-actualization, then she needs to start to be the one to really push the plot forward. No more relying on Josh. That way when the climax comes, she can choose to be a strong, independent character who knows that she can both be a capable individual and a loving wife and mother. So the best options for the story are for her to continue to seek Elise's help without Josh's permission, or for him to reluctantly agree to take Elise's help, with Renee leading the way. That's not what happens though. She begs Josh to reconsider, and eventually he sees some of Dalton's drawings, which leads him to believe that she may be right. So they call Elise back in. This makes the plot point Josh's choice and not Renee's, but fine. This is a minor issue, and as long as the rest of the story is about Renee, then this is just a small speed bump. In the next portion of a story arc, characters need to change their goal based on what happened at the midpoint. This is usually when the protagonist will really start to exhibit the change that will be made final at the climax. In Insidious, we learn that Dalton is too far gone, and someone is going to have to go in after him and risk never coming back. Perfect. This is great thematic storytelling. Renee, who feels trapped in her life and unable to be the person she wants to be, is going to become literally trapped outside of her body and forced to become the hero that her family needs. She will see that she is an incredibly strong and capable person, and once she saves Dalton, she will actively make the choice to come back to her family, thus fulfilling her arc and... Wait.
What are you talking about, Mom?
It's no accident that your son is a gifted traveler. The ability was handed down to him by his father.
Me?
Okay, so Josh is the only one who can do it, and it's sort of been his destiny since he was a kid? Okay. Well, this plot point seemed perfect for Renee, but whatever. Let's see where this goes. Maybe they'll find a different way to finish Renee's arc. So the new obstacle that changes the direction of the story is Elise sending Josh into the further to look for Dalton. This is juxtaposed with Renee back in the real world, who spends the next portion of the story crying on the couch, begging for Josh to come back.
I'm Josh! You've got to call him back! We're
Josh, come back to us, Josh, please!
The climax where the character change is supposed to take place in some big dramatic way takes place, and Renee is a bystander to all of it. She just sits on the couch and hopes for the best. She still has no agency in her life, she never gets a chance to overcome her flaws or grow in any meaningful way. Instead, she's just there. Yet the story is still exciting and terrifying. The stuff in the further is grade A horror, and it's incredibly tense watching Josh try to bring Dalton back. So when he manages to save him, it's a big relief. It's tension done right. But Josh doesn't seem like himself when he comes back, and he soon strangles Elise. He then runs away, leaving Renee to discover her body. This is the resolution of the story, where the character is supposed to return to the place in which they started, only fundamentally changed for the better. But Renee's remained the same, and that's the end of Insidious. It's about Elise, it's about Dalton, and most of all, it's about Josh. Renee was erased from her own story. Despite all the positive elements of Insidious, the film felt messy to me, and I think that's because of this lack of narrative focus. Josh was a likable and important character from the start, but it didn't feel like this was his journey until it suddenly was. Josh's arc didn't fit with the narrative nearly as well as Renee's did. If you have a story where somebody is trapped outside of their body and they have to fight to make it back, it only makes sense to have the protagonist be someone that feels trapped and has to make a choice whether to come back. It's perfect for Renee. The script honestly felt like it was written for Renee at the start, but changed to Josh for some reason. I don't know what that is, or if that's true, but that's how it felt. Insidious is a good horror movie, but it could have been great if it would have fulfilled the potential of Renee.
Tiptoe through the window, by the window, that is where I'll be. Come tiptoe through the tulips with